Boa tarde a todas.
Sou a deputada federal brasileira Yandra Moura, coordenadora geral do Observatório Nacional da Mulher na Política, e darei início agora à primeira mesa temática desta reunião de mulheres parlamentares do P20, com o tema Promovendo a Justiça Climática e o Desenvolvimento Sustentável para Mulheres e Meninas. O objetivo desta mesa é debater e identificar caminhos para reverter tais desigualdades baseadas em gênero e suas transversalidades, com o intuito de promover a justiça climática nos países do G20 e globalmente. Mais especificamente, a mesa debaterá estratégias orçamentárias para garantir financiamento adequado para ações de mitigação e adaptação climática que incorporem a perspectiva de gênero, políticas públicas para fortalecer a participação de mulheres, meninas e comunidades tradicionais nas instâncias decisórias climáticas nos níveis local, nacional e global, boas práticas de promoção da justiça climática para mulheres e meninas nos países do G20, levando em consideração suas interseccionalidades. Para começar, convido a falar
A calorosa hospitalidade e a beleza deslumbrante desse país dissiparam o meu cansaço após um longo voo. E agradeço profundamente por isso. Muito obrigado. Eu gostaria de expressar a minha profunda gratidão
that underpin our communities and has become one of the greatest obstacles to sustainable development for humanity. Furthermore, this threat is likely to have a greater impact on socio-economically vulnerable groups such as women and children than on those who are responsible for causing it. Dear delegates, recently, UN Women stated that the climate change crisis is exacerbating existing gender inequalities and that future climate change policies must be inclusive and require more gender-responsive strategies. Doesn't this mean that a sustainable future is impossible without the formulation and implementation of gender-equitable climate change policies? In response, the Korean National Assembly has recognized this current situation as a climate emergency and has made various legislative efforts to overcome it. In 2010, we enacted the Framework Act on Low-Carbon Green Growth to require the government to set greenhouse reduction targets and monitor their implementation. In 2012, we enacted a law to institutionalize the emissions trading system as a means to reduce GHG's cost effectively. In 2021, we enacted the Framework Act on Carbon Neutrality and Green Growth for coping with climate crisis to establish Climate Response Fund to secure the financial resources needed to promote the transition to a carbon-neutral society. In addition, we are increasing the size of the related budget and funds every year to strengthen climate change response, with the budget for this year amounted to 14.5 trillion won and 2.4 trillion won respectively. At the same time, in order to ensure that the voices of women from vulnerable social groups are fully reflected in national decision-making processes, including climate change response, we have gradually increased the proportion of women in politics. This began with the introduction of the quota system for women in proportional representation in parliamentary seats in 2000. In the recently held 22nd National Assembly election, women won 20% of all seats. Of course, we have a long way to go. In addition, based on the National Finance Act and the Framework Act on Gender Equality, a gender-responsive budget system that analyzes the impact of the budget on women and men and reflects it in the financial management of national and local governments has been introduced and implemented since 2006. In 2024, this year, about 23.7 trillion Korean won was allocated to 40 organizations and 283 projects, with plans to gradually increase the amount each year. Furthermore, we are also providing tailored education and training to empower women in agriculture, fisheries, and rural areas that are vulnerable to climate change, as well as support for stable resettlement such as childcare, employment, labor, and legal advice. However, despite these efforts, there is still no separate legislation and budget to support women and children directly affected by the climate crisis. Therefore, we are working to enact a law to protect vulnerable groups in the future, or amend the Framework Act on Carbon Neutrality and Green Growth to write into law the definition and scope of vulnerable groups. We also intend to establish a national plan to increase the adaptive capacity of vulnerable groups and provide a basis for project implementation and budget support. Honorable delegates, we are gathered here to recognize the urgent need for concrete and bold legislation and policies for women's political participation and gender-responsive climate action. Now is the time to commit to women's participation in climate action and to achieving gender equality. It is time to ensure that the voices of women leaders in climate action, environmental protection, and disaster risk reduction are not drowned out as we intensify our response to climate change. I look forward to seeing our discussions reflected in the policies of our governments and to seeing binding gender-responsive climate action become more widespread. In the words of Martin Luther King, let's move forward with the fierce urgency of now towards women's participation in climate action and achieving gender equality. Thank you for your attention.
Neste momento, convido a falar por 5 minutos a representante dos Estados Unidos.
Right now, we want to invite for 5 minutes the next guest speaker.
Host country, for your vibrant hospitality. It is an honor to be invited to share this experience in female power. I'd like to offer deep appreciation to Speaker Arturo Lira and the entire Brazilian delegation. Hello, everyone. My name is Sydney Camlogger Dove, and I am a Congresswoman from Los Angeles in the United States. I serve on the House Foreign Affairs Committee and the House Natural Resources Committee, and I am also a co-chair of the Brazil Caucus in the United States Congress. It is an honor to be among so many trailblazing women legislators who are breaking glass ceilings around the world. I'd like to tell you a short story about Alma. Alma is an older, feisty, religious Black woman in my district. She runs a recycling program in South LA from her front yard. It has offered a safe space for exchange, it has lifted the environment, and it has created a new economy and workforce. Many women have flocked to Alma's space for inspiration because she has been a blueprint for the honest urban hustle. She is also an example of the female resiliency and resolve. I'm sure each of us has someone like Alma in our life. Because of the hard-fought, hard-earned gains for women, it is because of women like Alma that we have a seat at the table, even if sometimes we've had to bring that seat to the table. It is a fight that is generations in the making. Every woman today is following a path paved by the women who came before them. We have come a long way, and we still have far to go. I should know, out of the 535 members, there are only 31 Black women serving in Congress today, myself included. As women, we have an intuitive understanding of the power of decisions made before our lifetime to affect our quality of life today. The ripple effects of brave women who are not afraid to speak up and move the needle forward. This insight is more relevant than ever as we policymakers confront an existential threat to our planet, the climate crisis. The entity that brings us life every day through access to land, sea, and air is indeed a woman. She is Mother Earth, and she needs our collective attention. The ripple effects of decisions being made today are more consequential for the future of humankind than ever before, and it is we who are in a position to meaningfully improve the circumstances of the women who come after us. Now that we have a seat at the table, we have a real opportunity to leave the world better off for our daughters and our daughters' daughters. How can we do this? Climate change is a collective action problem, and we all have a role to play in addressing it. It is not an issue that just one or even a few countries can tackle on their own. It requires a global response relative to the abilities of each country. It requires an approach that is inclusive, respectful, and honest. It requires an approach worthy of a mother. The United States is trying to do its part, responding to calls from our young people and the international community. The Inflation Reduction Act passed by Congress was the largest investment in reducing carbon emissions in our history. But we can and we must do more. The climate crisis will affect every person in every country in the world, no matter if you're rich or poor, young or old, regardless of your skin tone, religion, language, or orientation. As the COVID pandemic revealed, there is a risk of major backsliding in the political, social, and economic inclusion of women and girls in particular. Our policy response must center these marginalized groups the most. My home state of California is plagued by wildfires and drought every year. Brazil just experienced historic levels of flooding. We must be clear-eyed in recognizing that climate change will disproportionately impact the most vulnerable among us, women and girls, often poor, often marginalized, and often unseen. But we, as women, see them, and we must widen the aperture to make sure our male counterparts do as well. Development is a crucial component of the climate change adaptation conversation. Alleviating poverty, increasing access to health and education, and promoting equity are intrinsic to the climate solutions that we must continue to put forward. If we want to leave our daughters a world with greater opportunity, we must encourage more women to get into the climate solutions game. Those most vulnerable to climate change, women and people from the global south, are drastically underrepresented in climate science research. Roughly 12% of the world's top climate scientists are women, and fewer than 1% are from Africa. We must work together to create a stronger pipeline for women and underrepresented communities to lead in conservation, ecology, food science, and climate research. women are always a critical part of the answer. We know that today's climate policies will shape the future for generations to come. We also know that women and girls have the most at stake in a climate-stressed world. If there was ever a time when the world is calling out for more almas, both big and small, it is now. Thank you. Obrigada.
Neste momento, convido a falar.
Right now, I want to invite for 5 minutes the representative of Brazil.
Boa tarde a todos.
Good afternoon, everyone. I want to greet all delegations present here.
Até aqui,
And up to now, history has shown us that women working in the front line, in the leadership, advocating for a sustainable development project and a fair project, they are right. Women have insisted throughout the world, and we are following the same in a project of development that is sustainable and that includes women. All over the world, more and more, the current development project sustained by austerity and the predatory exploitation of the environment has produced diseases, poverty, hunger, and death. In our country, several severe events show how perverse this model is. They cannot be called tragedies because they are not accidents. They are made of wrong political choices. And as someone from Minas Gerais, I have to remember the crimes of Mariana and Brumadinho. They cannot be forgotten. And more recently, the serious floods in the Rio Grande do Sul state and drought in the Amazon. Yes, women are the most affected in economic losses, migration, increase of violence, children marriage, school evasion, loss of income. These are some of the social problems caused by the climate crisis that impact women disproportionately. All over the world, the perspective is over 1.2 billion people will be dislodged, and 80% will be women in areas affected by these disasters and the climate crisis, like extreme drought. Women have to care not only for the house and children, but they also have to seek water and food. The greater the drought, the greater the challenge to find water and food. That's why we state that we need another project. Two positions are wrong and are on the grounds of this catastrophic event. The first is ideology. Ideology was very evident in our country, and it denies the existence of climate changes, despite all scientific evidence. And the second is the exploitation of body and lands, that is the predatory extractivist, breaking environmental rules at the service of profit, only putting us all, Earth, women, territories, lives, under risk and threat constantly. That's why we insist that defending economic austerity to strengthen exclusively the market and denial of climate changes are responsible for every life lost, every girl violated, every territory destroyed by the increase of poverty and hunger of women in the world. The sector insists on putting superior defense over the lives of people. And some say that limiting resources from health and education should be a national effort to achieve the superior goal. But we state the other way around. We need a budget that ensures public policies that are universal. We need a budget that will ensure the defense and prevention of environmental crisis. Austerity policy has increased the concentration of income, increased the distance between rich and the poor. Today, the 3% more richer controls 50% of the world wealth, and they are the greatest responsible for environmental crimes and disasters. That's why climate justice will only be possible with a development project that is based on equal distribution of economic resources in the world, in defending the environment and democracy. Brazil has taken over G20 and has promoted topics like social inclusion, reduction of inequality, putting at the center the reduction of inequality and fighting hunger. Brazil has stated that sustainable development has economic, social, environmental, and democratic dimensions. Under the successful leadership of Brazil in G20, we have the opportunity of putting the world agenda a new perspective of sustainable policies, one that articulates taxation of large fortunes, and that it builds up protection to the environment in a global development project that is sustainable and equal. Under feminist precepts and with the experience we have in the practice of women defending territories, this is the moment that we are once again here. And I want to highlight here what has been done in the House of Representatives of Brazil in projects that contribute to the climate, like energy efficiency, sustainable sources of energy that maintain decarbonization, defend a circular economy to build a fair transition. And many of these projects were created by women. That's why they are needed, so that women are in the center of the decision making of these policies, so that we have followed. The more women are included, more we advance to build a development that is truly sustainable and fair. Thank you.
Neste momento, convido a falar por 5 minutos a representante do Reino Unido.
I thank His Excellency President Lula da Silva for convening this G20 event. And I also thank the Honourable Arthur Lira, President of the Chamber of Deputies, and the Women's Caucus here today for their work in organising this inaugural meeting. It is a privilege to be here to listen to and to learn from esteemed colleagues. As women parliamentarians, we are all aware that women, girls and indigenous communities face the worst impacts of climate change. May I express my sympathies for those in Brazil who experienced the devastating climate change-related floods across Rio Grande do Sul this year. The UK has expressed its readiness to support the work of reconstruction. Drought is also one of the severe extreme weather events intensified by climate change. When it hits, family incomes drop sharply, and hard choices often involve pulling daughters out of school to help out on the farm or be married off to alleviate the family's economic burden. On the other hand, research shows that keeping girls in school and enabling them to complete their education correlates with better adaptation to climate change. Women and girls who survive extreme weather events also face unique challenges and dangers during displacement. Amongst them is sexual violence, exploitation and abuse, and human trafficking. We will only be successful in our work to remediate and mitigate climate change if we work together multinationally, multilaterally, to unlock the full potential and power of women and girls, so that we accelerate progress on all global development priorities. I therefore welcome the joint declaration by the UK and Brazil to work in partnership on green and inclusive growth, and to foster a just and inclusive ecological transition. We have been long-term champions of the rights of women and girls around the world through our diplomatic development and legislative work, including passing the International Development Gender Equality Act. But there is more, so much more, that needs to be done. The UK allocates 0.5% of its gross national income to overseas development assistance and plans to return to our target of 0.7% as soon as fiscal circumstances allow. Our commitment to transparency and partnership is shown by the UK's publication of the budgets and country allocations for the current financial year. Additionally, the UK has pledged to spend £11.6 billion on climate finance for overseas partners by 2026. It is vital to integrate gender equality into all our economic diplomacy in order to create meaningful jobs, trading opportunities, and leverage innovative investment in and for women. British International Investment is the UK's development finance institution. It co-founded the global initiative to drive the gender lens investing in developing countries. That has led to over $16 billion worth of investment. All governments should ensure that locally led women's rights organisations are at the very heart of setting development priorities in their communities. I have had the privilege of witnessing the work of local WROs, for example in Colombia, Uganda, and the Democratic Republic of the Congo. Currently, the UK is working with like-minded partners from all regions to empower local women's rights organisations through a £38 million fund. As parliamentarians, we can use our voices to ensure that our governments work multilaterally to take systemic and urgent action. But we can take practical action within Parliament too. I give my commitment that I will encourage the committees throughout the UK Parliament in both houses, Commons and Lords, to ensure that their inquiry work should also always include a women-specific focus. I encourage esteemed colleagues to join me in that commitment. Thank you.
Neste momento, convido a falar por 5 minutos.
Now I want to invite for 5 minutes the Indonesian representative, and please say your name before you speak. Thank you.
Thank you. Honorable Chair, delegates, ladies and gentlemen, on behalf of the House of Representatives of the Republic of Indonesia, I'd like to express my gratitude to the National Congress of Brazil for hosting the first P20 meeting of women parliamentarians here in Maceió. My name is Vanda Sarundayang. I am the member of the Committee for Interparliamentary Cooperation of the Indonesian House of Representatives. I am accompanied by Ms. Dewi Koryati, Ms. Linda Megawati, Ms. Rati Megasari Singkaru, and Mr. Andi Muawiyah Ramli, who are also members of the committee. Ladies and gentlemen, climate change, as one of the greatest challenges of our lifetime, has affected people's rights, including the right to health. It may also hinder the progress towards achieving gender equality, as according to the UN Women, climate change could push an additional 158 million women and girls into poverty and 236 million women into hunger. Investing in green economy, including renewable energy, can be a solution to overcome climate change and also poverty, as it could create 24 million green jobs by 2030. The approaches, however, must address the interlinked challenges between climate change and gender equality, including women in decision-making process, mainstreaming gender equality in our parliamentary function, investing in women's green skills development, and supporting women in green entrepreneurship should therefore be among our priorities. Ladies and gentlemen, in an effort to combat climate change, Indonesia's own greenhouse gas emission reduction target in enhanced nationally determined contribution or NDC is now 31.89%, while the target with international support is 43.20%. Indonesia also targets achieving 23% renewable energy mix by 2025, and now the new and renewable energy bill has become our Parliament initiative bill. Furthermore, Indonesia 2020-2024 National Medium-Term Development Plan highlights a commitment of increasing the role and participation of women in development. Indonesia this year has also launched the National Action Plan on Gender and Climate Change, which supports the contribution of women and children to preventing climate change and realization of gender-responsive climate change planning and budgeting. It also encompasses priority areas, including monitoring and reporting. In addition, Indonesia has the Pre-Employment Card Program, which offers green skills training for job seekers and or those who would like to improve their skills. Green financing and or credit has also been implemented by several Indonesian banks, which can assist friendly companies, including women-led micro, small, medium enterprises. Ladies and gentlemen, cooperation is also key to tackling climate change and gender inequality. Parliament should therefore encourage strong cooperation between countries, including in the field of technology, investment and capacity building, and in realizing climate funding commitment of $100 billion mobilized by developed countries per year by 2020 through 2025. We will also keep advocating for and mainstreaming gender equality in climate action at national and international level, and cooperating with civil society and external parties in that regard. I thank you.
Neste momento, convido a falar por 5 minutos a representante da Rússia e peço que se identifique no início da fala, por favor.
So, good day, dear colleagues. So, once again, I would like to thank everybody for the organization of this wonderful event. So, I thank the Parliament of Brazil and Mr. Arthur Lira and the Upper House of the Federal Assembly of the Russian Federation. I'm the Vice President of the Committee for Agriculture and Nature Resources. I'm responsible for the ecological development. Our planet today is experiencing worsening environmental problems, and women are well aware that their future and the future of their families depends on the responsible environmental stewardship. The women's environmental conscientiousness enables them to make rational decisions in their daily lives aimed at minimizing the negative impact on the environment. That is why it is very important for women to play their role in addressing global environmental challenges. Environmental sustainability is the basis for the well-being of our society and future generations. Russia has the necessary natural resources and is striving to address the issues of economic development and welfare for the growth and the interests of the present and future generations. That is why we welcome the active work of the Brazilian presidency of the G20 on climate and environmental sustainability. We support the chairmanship's emphasis on the implementation of the entire set of sustainable development goals, the strict implementation of the provisions of multilateral agreements in the environmental and climatic spheres, the global mobilization of efforts to combat climate change, and the consideration of the problem of bioeconomy. Russia sees the environmental and climate agenda as the field for joining efforts to address these global challenges. At the same time, we oppose the use of this platform for discrimination of competitors and promoting vested interests. We are sure that the green agenda requires us to move towards common approaches to taxonomy and sustainable development, as well as low emission standards for products and the realization of different projects, green finance and carbon projects. And in order to deal with this ideas, Russia is going to get the carbon neutrality up to 2060, and this is why we carry out different measures in order for the green energy to be implemented in our strategic document. The strategy and the structure of the energy in our country is one of the greenest in the world. In order to deal with the sustainability and ecology, since 2019, Russia has been implementing the national project which is called Ecology on waste, air, water, biodiversity and the development of ecological tourism. In 2020, the national goals for development were synchronized with the SDGs, which should be attained to 2030. This year, they were changed a little bit in order for the ecological well-being be the separate goals of the development of the Russian Federation. In order to achieve this, women play a very important role as organizational one and both others. As mothers and heads of families, so women do the necessary impact on the state, developing the lifestyle of their families for future generations. Russia has lots of good examples of the participation of women in order to deal with the problems of climate and ecology. And in the Federation Council, we organized an exhibition, the Russian and the Women's Faith for Ecology. In May 2023, on the sidelines of the Neva International Ecology Congress, there was an open dialogue between the women of ecological initiatives. And on this international platform, women could talk about their international initiatives and the implemented projects in the sphere of economy. For example, in the nuclear sphere, in order to address the environmental sustainability issues, we also deal with the Eurasian Women's Forum, which is held under the aegis of the Federation Council of Russian Federation each 3 years. At the third Eurasian Women's Forum in October 2021 in St. Petersburg, we opened a special ecological platform which has its goal to develop the next generation of women leaders for the ecological agenda in public sphere, business, education, culture, and social activity. In autumn 2023, we also adopted a new project for the Council of the Eurasian Women's Forum, the climatic initiatives and carbon regulation. The project is aimed at developing the efforts of women in Russia, BRICS, and G20 in order to reduce the carbon footprint. Its main goal is to ensure the number of ecological initiatives realized and implemented by Russian women or with their support. During the chairmanship in BRICS, Russia pays special attention to the questions of climate, and the main initiatives of the Russian Federation there is to create a special contact group on climate within BRICS. On its platform, we are going to discuss such important and relevant topics such as the best energy transition, energy market, the adaptation for changes of climate. Among our plans, we are also going to organize another summit of BRICS on climate, and in September, the 4th Eurasian Women's Forum in St. Petersburg. That is why we're very happy to invite all of our partners to take part in the debate on the green topics, and we think that the parliaments of our states can and will make the necessary contribution into the creation of a green agenda, maximizing its joining potential. Thank you very much.
Neste momento, convido a falar por 5 minutos a representante.
Now, the Brazilian representative has 5 minutes. I want to greet the president of this debate table, Yandra Moura, and dear parliamentaries present here and colleagues following us. I am honored to be part of this group of parliamentary women in P20 and other invited countries. I want to welcome you all coming to Brazil. And despite being a country with so many challenges and inequalities, is unique in its beauties, people, and diversity. I also would like to greet the President Arthur Lira, and the whole team of the House of Representatives of Brazil that made this important meeting possible. The scenario of climate emergency we live is urgent and require our attention and immediate action. According to the most recent report from the International Center of the Displacement, the displacements caused by climate events and other natural disasters have overcome those caused by war, repression, and violence in 2023. According to the report, Brazil is among the 6 countries with the greatest amount of displacements due to natural disasters. The numbers that are part of this data today must be even greater due to the tragedy in the state of Rio Grande do Sul that faces a devastating scenario with intensive rain and other floods that are destroying the state. This alarming data reinforce the need of integrated, sustainable policies to face the climate crisis. We need to adopt a global and cooperative approach with a proposal for the topic of P20 made in India in the last year. Parliament for one land, one family, one future, inspired by the Indian philosophy that, with my interpretation to the Indian colleagues, brings the idea that we have to understand ourselves globally as one single family. This vision invites us to recognize the interdependence of all people and nations and work together for a future where climate justice and social equity are achieved. I want to greet the presidency of India ahead of P20 in the past year, who brought us this valuable perspective of a global union. We women, we know how much it weighs on us when we deal with pain, death, and loss scenarios. COVID-19 pandemic made it clear how the lack of public policies, especially in health and education, fall disproportionately on women, limiting their opportunities of rest and work. Most of the time, women are responsible for taking care of their families and communities. The care crisis was highlighted during the pandemic, highlighting the need of sustainable policies in the long run. Women are frequently in charge of taking care of the family, also face additional challenges when there is no right directioning of public policies. Austerity and the reduction of essential public services increase the vulnerability of women, especially those that are having an overload of work and domestic work, and especially solo mothers, indigenous people that already have disparities of income, housing, and access to basic services. It is key to elaborate an encompassing vision on the reality of women in many contexts. It is not enough to consider only the female participation in public spaces. It is crucial to understand the impact of the private and family daily lives of women and their role in building a fair and sustainable society. We have to watch carefully the multiple layers of discrimination to understand different types of oppression that women face. Economic and cultural injustices are interconnected, and they demand actions that recognize and approach these complex relations. Policies that do not take these specificities into account may perpetrate or worsen the inequalities instead of solving them. In Brazil, women, especially Black, Indigenous, and solo mothers, are affected by extreme poverty and by the lack of access to essential services. Discrimination oftentimes hidden under the economic and social structures must be explicitly tackled to ensure public policies that promote true equality, taking into account different social contexts where we are in and the different territories where we are located. To ensure women's rights, it is key to incorporate public policies that transcend the single distribution of resources and that recognize the different realities that women face, promoting sustainable and inclusive development. By doing so, we can create a fair and more balanced society where all women have the opportunity to prosper. To our parliaments, we need to take this vision of care with ours and with the planet. We have to insist in the credibility of science that for so long has alerted us on the dangers of this scenario we see before us. It will only be from a lucid vision of a reality that we can have clearness in our actions and finally transforming the reality around us. Federal Constitution of Brazil in 1988 brought a key aspect in our letter. It imposes the public power and the people the power to defend and preserve the environment for the present and future generations. The future is constitutionally a responsibility of everyone present. There is no other planet to live. Our lives and the lives of our dear ones and the lives of those that are still to come depend on brave actions and assertive actions from people like us that have in their hands the possibility to make decisions that will impact the lives of our people. As decision makers, we need to ensure a minimal legislative ordering that guides us towards the necessary transformation and also an urgent transformation. I hope this meeting put us closer as one single global family and allow us to renew our breath, to go back to our offices with hope, courage, and willingness to work. Thank you all again for being here. Thank you. Now I want to invite for 5 minutes the representative of India.
Namaste, respected chairperson, fellow parliamentarians. We all know that the impacts of climate change affect countries, rich and poor, women and men, and older and younger generations differently. This has led to a growing focus globally on climate justice to address these disparities. Climate justice in adaptation requires us to consider both hazards and pre-existing vulnerabilities, especially among women. In mitigation, it advocates for an equitable share of the global carbon budget for every country while ensuring poverty eradication, adequate energy provision and sustainable development for all. Friends, women bring unique perspectives and essential skills for addressing environmental challenges, encouraging their leadership in decision-making and policy formulations ensures comprehensive and equitable climate actions. Empowering women through education, capacity building and resource access enhances their sustainable contributions and strengthens community religions. Since 1993, India has reserved seats for women in local bodies, with over 1.4 million elected women representatives shaping local development today. Friends, the Government of India embraces the people, planet prosperity philosophy, crucial for achieving the Sustainable Development Goals. Mission Life, launched at COP26 in Glasgow, recognizing India's sustainable cultural traditions, with women playing a pivotal role in maintaining them. India has made significant strides in gender mainstreaming within its climate policies and initiatives. Today, I am honored to speak about some of the remarkable initiatives undertaken by the India government to empower women and their profound impact on our societies. Firstly, the government prioritizes gender-responsive policies through gender budgeting. Programs like the Mahila Kisan Sashaktikiran Pariyojana empower women farmers, while the Pradhan Mantri Ujjwala Yojana provides clean cooking fuel, enhancing health and environmental outcomes. The latter has benefited over 100 million households till now. Similarly, the Beti Bachao, Beti Padhao initiative addresses the declining child sex ratio and promotes the welfare of the girl child through education and protection, fostering a generation more aware of environmental issues. The National Mission for Empowerment of Women promotes gender equality and women's empowerment across various sectors, including climate change. In August 2023, the government launched the Krasi Sakhi Convergence Program, helping farms adopt sound agriculture practices and build capacity in climate change adaptation. The National Action Plan on Climate Change also includes missions aimed at adapting to climate change and enhancing ecological sustainability, incorporating gender considerations. Under the Deen Dayal Antyodaya Yojana, National Rural Livelihood Mission, the Mahila Kisan Sashaktikiran Pariyojana empowers women to enhance their participation and productivity, ensuring food security and economic resilience. The Jal Jeevan Mission provides safe drinking water via household tap connections, significantly reducing the time women spend collecting water and improving health across 150 million households. The Mahatma Gandhi National Rural Employment Guarantee Act guarantees 100 days of wage employment to rural households. Focusing on sustainable asset creation, women key beneficiaries of this scheme participate in projects like water conservation, contributing to community resilience. India, our the UNFCCC, also integrates gender perspectives via its Gender Action Plan to promote women leadership in climate policy and action. To address sanitary waste and pink tax, the government provides biodegradable sanitary napkins and affordable rates with over 500 million souls till it. Lastly, government is investing in renewable energy and ensuring women's involvement in innovation and the transition to a carbon neutral economy, exemplified by India's leadership in the International Solar Alliance. In conclusion, climate policy aimed at sustainable development must consider all stakeholders, including women, to ensure an inclusive future. India's strides in climate justice and gender mainstreaming are seen in its robust policy initiatives and programs prioritizing women's empowerment and inclusion in climate action. Thank you.
Neste momento, convido a falar por 5 minutos a representante da Itália.
Grazie, boa tarde a todas e a todos. Voglio ringraziare il
Gostaria de agradecer ao Parlamento do Brasil
iniziativa così importante L'argomento di oggi è fondamentale per il futuro di tutti noi.
Theme today is fundamental for all of us. One of the typical aspects of the climate change is that
ovunque nello stesso modo.
although
Spesso a soffrirne di più non sono coloro che
usually
contribuiscono a generarlo.
indicative of the inequity of the climate crisis brings with it is the assessment of the effects of change from a gender perspective. For a long time, there has been a tendency to treat the gender separately, but the two topics have several points in contact. The environmental and climate crisis has a social dimension that can also produce or increase gender inequalities. So-called ecofeminism is also represented in Italy at a political level, advocating an approach to environmental dynamics from a female point of view and combining the defense of women's values and rights with the protection of the earth and the health of living beings. The premise of this combined approach is the realization that the subordination of women in the abuse of natural resources are conceptually and historically interconnected, symbolizing a capitalist patriarchal domination perpetrated over time by subjects who place themselves on a plane of superiority over subjects deemed inferior. An analysis from a gender and feminist perspective does not run parallel to other perspectives on the environment, but intersects with these to consider them from the side of those who are most exposed and most vulnerable. In fact, there is no doubt that women are among the first victims of all crises: economic, social, war, climate and environmental. But the Objective 5 of the UN 2030 Agenda not only corresponds to a principle of justice, but also one of effectiveness. Tackling the climate crisis involves deploying the best possible talents in every discipline. Looking for them in only 49% of the population is a failure. Moreover, the women have to occupy themselves of the consequences of other people, and this has become an attitude to counter all the crises of this moment. Climate change, the burden of climate change on women can be countered by empowering women and recognizing them as important agents of change. On environmental and climate issues, there is significant gender underrepresentation in institutions and places of these characteristics is also persistent and is confirmed by indicators in my country, Italy, in which we have only 200 women in 600 parliamentaries. We need to work together to likewise, it is crucial that women participate more actively in decision-making and policy development at all levels. This inequality often prevents women from fully contributing to decision-making, also on climate issues. It is therefore important that women have equal access to knowledge, a prerequisite for influencing climate change. Like in 2023, the European Institute for Gender Equality dedicated a focus to the link between green transition and ecological conversion, launching the Greener Europe. After a first phase, we are now uniting the gender in Italy. Since PNRR has been implemented, the Plan for Recovery and Resilience, as part of the Next Generation Path promoted by the European Union following the pandemic crisis, funding and monitoring activities have been envisaged, which measure the relationship between gender policies and actions for sustainable development. And in the Italian budget, it has been added the reclassification of individual budget items with reference to expenses that promote gender equality, also in correlation with the objectives of sustainability of the 2030 agenda. PNRR finances many objectives to tackle climate change. In these days, Italy is under attack because of the consequences of the crisis, with the north of Italy having lots of rain and lots of drought in southern Italy. We have to do more and urgently to support women not to suffer the consequences of climate and to become the protagonists of sustainable development. We need to implement many environmentally sustainable projects. I'm talking about creating crashes and education in schools, the introduction of salaries, just salaries. All of these measures can help women to be protagonists in the ultimately, to promote a more just and sustainable society for everyone, is also empowering women. Also in Italy, these relationships are caused because of inequalities between women and men, and this means promoting a sustainable society for everyone. We will never be free in Italy or anywhere in the world if we are not equal economically in society, the society in which we live. Thank you.
Neste momento, convido a falar por 5 minutos a representante de São Tomé e Príncipe.
Selmira Sacramento, Parlamento São Tomense. Antes de mais,
before we begin, please allow me to thank on my own name, on my own behalf, on behalf of the Parliament that I am a leader of. I'd like to thank and congratulate the Chamber of Deputies, the Congress and the co-funders for the organization of this such an important event, an event which is crucial for our collective future, which is a moment of addressing women, climate justice, and sustainability in the environment. Therefore, when we address this sort of topics, it's important for us to acknowledge the essential role that women have, not only as agents for change, but also as being the most affected by the climate and environmental injustices. Moreover, women, especially those who reside or who live in the least favorable regions in the world, they face a disproportionate load due to their vulnerability in the socio-economic realms and also their roles, which is quite often central in the livelihoods of their families. Therefore, we must reflect throughout this debate about the interconnection between the climate justice and environmental sustainability, while recognizing the fundamental role that women play within this context, because many societies have been quite often having women as the guardians of the sustainable practices and also the natural resources. Their voices and contributions and the processes in the decision-making are essential to ensure that the public policies will address not only the immediate needs, but also the long-term necessities, while aiming to achieve sustainability that we all strive for. I'd like to also highlight that climate change is not just an environmental matter, it's also a matter of global justice. More industrialized countries, which have been led forward by short-term policies, and an unmeasurable voracity for natural resources have been leading the way towards the excessive pollution and waste. This egotistical practice not only degrades the environment but also creates an injustice which is flagrant towards those who contribute less to the global emissions, while at the same time are the most affected by the effects which are quite devastating. For us to reverse this scenario, to flip it upside down, we must take drastic and coordinated measures, coordinated between industrialized countries so that they can take their responsibilities for the environmental impact and also the results in the lack of equality. That means not only reducing their emissions, but also providing financial support for the countries which are in development, the developing countries, towards a transition into environmental sustainability. We propose a future in which the use of natural resources and also mineral resources is balanced and sustainable, while ensuring that the coming generations will also enjoy the fruits of our land, the resources from our land. That demands ambitious social policies, investments in clean technologies, and also a cultural change towards sustainable consumption and also sustainable production. I could not finish my speech here if I wouldn't speak about my own country, St. Thomas and Friends, which has been showing quite thorough involvement in the environmental sustainability. As a proof of that commitment, we highlight the forests that have been preserved, including the Lobo National Park, which are notable examples of its biodiversity and also the natural wealth or richness. This park is an environmental sanctuary which houses several endemic species and also plays a fundamental role in the conservation of the local ecosystem. Moreover, St. Thomas and Friends has a very strict legislation which regulates the extraction of inerts and also other natural resources and minerals and ores. These laws, they're fundamental for ensuring that such practices are made in a sustainable manner, in such a way that will minimize environmental impacts. Another example I could bring, a notable example, which is the oil legislation, which foresees the retention of part of the revenue towards the future generations, ensuring that the benefits of the natural resources are all shared equitatively through time. Those efforts are part of a commitment which is continuous between countries to promote environmental justice and also environmental sustainability on the long term, while at the same time that we are promoting responsible economic and balanced development. Together we can create a world in which everybody can prosper in harmony with our planet. The future depends on us. Thank you very much for your attention.
Neste momento, convido a falar por 5 minutos a
I now invite
representante da
for
Noruega.
5 minutes the delegate from Norway.
Thank you, Chair. My name is Linda and I'm a MP from the Norwegian Parliament, and I'm a member of the Energy and Climate Committee. First of all, I have to thank the Chamber of Deputies of Brazil for the invitation and for taking the initiative to arrange this important and timely meeting. Norway truly appreciates the invitation from the Brazilian presidency of the G20 to take part in the work of the as a guest country. This invitation testifies the close, wide-range cooperation our two countries have enjoyed for so many years. Dear host, on behalf of the Norwegian Parliament, I would like to express our solidarity with Brazil and the people affected by the flood in Rio Grande do Sul. It was truly devastating to see how the heavy rain led to several deaths, displaced hundreds of thousands of people, and caused several damage to critical infrastructure. The catastrophe is a tragic and powerful backdrop to many of the issues we have gathered to discuss here today. Dear colleagues, the Norwegian government is deeply committed to the green transition, both at home and abroad. The green transition creates sustainable opportunities for more sustainable developments for our societies and economics. It also poses some significant challenges. On such challenge facing is to ensure climate justice for all. We need to heed to human rights when we invest in green transition. The considerations of women, race and indigenous people must be taken into account in climate measure and politics. In 2013, the Norwegian Ministry of Petroleum and Energy issued license to build and operate several wind farms up in north of Norway. The wind farm was built on the same area where our indigenous people, the Samic, carry out the culture to reindeer herding. This led to a massive demonstration against onshore wind. The Samic people complained and the Norwegian Supreme Court ruled that the license for the wind farms was invalid. The government have apologized to the Samic people, and together they have made an agreement on compensations. Human rights and climate measures belong together. It's the same case. Last year, the Norwegian government adopted action plans for women's rights and gender equality in Norway's foreign and development policy. The plan entails that 50% of all bilateral foreign aid must include gender equality and objectivity. Furthermore, gender equality must be mainstream in all policy areas, particularly within finance, climate, energy and food security. 50% of the world population are women and must be given real influence in decision-making processing in green transition. We can often see that women are included on a local level, but on the higher level on decision-making, there are less women to see and hear, especially in financial decisions. Norway supports Brazil's policy of reducing deforestation through the Amazon Fund. Earlier this month, we signed a new transfer for $50 million to fund the result achieved. Part of this support goes to small-scale projects in traditional communities. Finally, I would like to promote the work of public expenditure and financial accountability, PEFA, which Norway supports. The model for weighting gender-responsive public financial management is a useful tool for countries to measure and approve the degree to which the public finance framework address such matters as gender equality. Dear sisters, to help empower women and fight climate change, we need transparently process, cheering each other, and bold men that gives women the space to make independent decisions that regards power and finances. Thank you for the attention.
Neste momento, convido a falar por 5
And I invite to
minutos
speak for
a
5
representante
minutes
de
a delegate
Portugal.
from Portugal. Good afternoon, everybody. My name is Siga-nos, and I speak on behalf of the Portuguese Parliament. And I was thinking to myself, I would like to start by thanking. I'd like to thank the President of the House of Representatives, Arthur Lira, for making this happen and to make such an important meeting happen in Brazil, which is a brother country to Portugal. So it's a great pleasure for us to be here representing. I'd also like to congratulate here today Yandra Mora, who's a delegate who's also conducting the work that we have here today, and also to lead our note of congratulations to her. It makes me very satisfied to discuss a topic which is quite often is left outside of what we call the equality agenda.
a questão de género e as
specifically about
alterações
gender and also
climáticas, bem
climate
como a
change.
situação que as
It has
mulheres
to
e as
do with the
meninas
situation in which women
ficam,
and
não raras
girls,
vezes,
they not
fruto
often become
daquelas que vão sendo as catástrofes, aquelas mudanças que vamos conhecendo
become
todos os dias
affected by the catastrophes that we see every day,
normalmente
and
nos
that
esquecemos
often
nestas
we
agendas.
forget
Falar
of
do
those
caso de
agendas.
Portugal,
When we speak about the case
como
of
nota
Portugal
prévia,
then,
Portugal tem o combate
as a
às
starting
alterações
point,
climáticas
Portugal has been fighting
como
climate
um
change
dos desígnios
as one of the
nacionais.
main
E tem, desde
national
alguns anos, tendo dado
topics.
grande
Have been
ênfase a
having
essa
put in a lot of
necessidade
emphasis
desde 2021,
since
altura
2021,
em que aprovamos
when
as
we
leis de bases do
approved
clima,
or passed
onde
the
se
basic
reconhece logo no
climate
artigo
laws, where we see
2º,
in the second
número 1
article,
dessa lei,
number 1 of
a
this
emergência
bill of law,
climática
the climate
é
emergency
reconhecida nessa lei.
is acknowledged within this bill of law.
Sendo Portugal como
And
país
Portugal,
que
being
faz
a
parte
country
da
which is
União
part of the European Union,
obviamente,
of course,
todas as nossas
all of our
políticas em termos também
policies,
de combate às
also in
alterações
terms of the
climáticas,
fighting
estão
against
sempre
climate change,
ligadas
is
às
always
chamadas
linked to
estratégias
what we call
europeias também
European
de
strategies.
combate
It's always in line
às
with those
alterações
in fighting the
climáticas,
climate
desenvolvimento
change
sustentável.
in sustainable
Para
development.
isso, para além da lei,
In order,
da lei de
well,
bases do
besides
clima,
the
temos uma estratégia
basic
nacional de
climate
combate
laws, we
às
have the
alterações
national agenda
climáticas,
for fighting
bem
climate
como
change, as well as, well, and not
uma
to
aposta
mention it
claríssima
in a less
naquela que são os
a
modos
very
de produção
important bet, which is the
sustentável,
sustainable
quer a
production means,
agricultura
which is
sustentável, a
sustainable
pecuária
agriculture,
sustentável, tendo medidas
having
como
measures
a
such
redução
as
das
the
emissões
reduction
através
of
do
the
uso de
emissions
energias limpas,
through the
uma
clean
grande
energy
aposta no
production, which is a
solar,
huge
na
bet we have on
eólica,
photovoltaic
e
energies,
isto
wind energy,
tudo
and with
conjugado
that,
também com aquilo que são as
together, all of
políticas
those things together.
internacionais
This is the international
e com
policy.
aquilo que é o nosso papel ao
And
sermos
what is our role?
signatários do
We
Acordo de
have
Paris.
we have
Algo que
people
nós vamos
that have signed the
assistindo
Paris
e que parece que já
Agreement.
passou tanto tempo,
So it
mas
seems
não
that it has
passou.
been so
E é
long, but it
compromisso
hasn't
da União
been all
Europeia,
really. So it's a
compromisso
commitment
a
by
que
the
todos os
European Union.
países
It's a
membros
commitment that
têm
we
que
all
estar vinculados,
have to be
empenhados
linked
para que o
in
façam
this, together in
acontecer.
this, and then
A
put an
Europa,
effort into
como
this
a
for
União
this to happen.
Europeia,
In the European Union,
está num ponto de grande
we're at a
avanço em
point
relação a
of great
grande parte dos
advancements in
países
terms
do
of,
mundo.
in
E
comparison to other
perguntar-se há
countries of the
muitas
world,
das
and also
mulheres
to
que
think
hoje fazem política e se
of
preocupam
whether
com
women
estas
who make
questões.
politics today,
Porquê
if
contar
they worry
apenas
about
a
these
solução de
issues.
Portugal?
So
E qual é o nosso
should
ponto
we
de vista
only speak about
legislativo tem a
Portugal?
ver com as meninas e com as mulheres?
And what does the
Porque, de
legislative
facto, as meninas e as
branch
mulheres
has to do
têm-nos
with women and
ensinado
girls?
as
Because women and girls have been
catástrofes, as
teaching through the
guerras,
catastrophes,
as
the
pandemias,
wars,
como foi a
pandemics as we have with
Covid-19, são as
COVID-19.
primeiras e o elo mais
They are the
fraco
first
que cai na
and the
cadeia
weakest that
quando
fall
estamos perante
down
alguma
with the
situação de
chain
dificuldade.
when they
Isso
face
tem
any kind of
acontecido um pouco
challenges.
por todo o mundo.
That's been happening
Aconteceu em
throughout the
Portugal
world. It's
na
happening in
Covid.
Portugal through
As primeiras a ir
COVID-19
para casa
pandemic.
foram as mulheres.
The
As
first
primeiras
ones
a
to go
perder o
back
seu
home were the
emprego foram
women.
as
The first
mulheres.
ones to lose their
As
jobs were the women.
primeiras
The
a
first
ficarem na
ones
situação
to
mais
be in a
vulnerável
more
e
vulnerable
cuidadores da sua
situation in terms
família
of
foram
looking
as
after their
mulheres.
households were
Isto tem um
women.
impacto muito
And this
especial,
has had a
especialmente
very
nas
special
famílias
impact,
monoparentais.
specifically the
São o mais
mono-parents
fraco,
of
o elo
families,
mais fraco desta
the
cadeia mais
single
fraca.
mother's
E, portanto,
families
é
and the
preciso
single
uma
father's
atenção
families. So
muito
that's the
especial
weakest
a
link in this
estas
chain.
meninas,
So you have to pay a lot of
mulheres
attention to
e
that. These
mães
girls and women,
monoparentais
and also the
que têm uma
monoparental
renda, como se diz no
families which have a
Brasil, mais
livelihood,
baixa.
as we call it here in Brazil,
E a
renda,
aposta na
which is
educação
low.
é
And also
fundamental
to
para
bet
quebrar
on
essa fragilidade
something
em que as mulheres estão constantemente expostas.
These women are
E é
frequently
precisamente com
exposed to those
educação,
dangers.
com o
With
elevador
education
social, que é a
and
nossa
also
aposta
looking into
principal,
social aspects,
para
which is our
além
main
do
bet,
combate e da
besides the
sustentabilidade
fighting
das nossas políticas
and also
públicas.
maintaining
Temos
our public
verificado
policies. We have been
que,
seeing
apesar das mulheres
that
em
in
Portugal
spite of the women
terem
in
cada vez
Portugal
mais o acesso à
having
educação,
more and more
hoje
access to
temos mais
education, we
mulheres
have nowadays
formadas,
more
licenciadas, com
graduated
ensino
women
obrigatório completado.
with also with
Há
a
desafio
full school
continuar a
education.
colocar as mulheres numa situação de
There's
maior
still a challenge in
fragilidade
making
e
women
pobreza.
taking women away from frailty and poverty. They still have the more social jobs such as carers, and they also earn the lower wages. In a global economy, makes Portugal and also many countries of the world, even though the so-called developed world countries, we're still in a more frail position, fragile. It's also important that all countries that are here today represented here, that we are all making an effort and all having a commitment in the proper fighting of the lack of equality for women and girls. And they are and also the world of businesses and also the first victims of the climate change. In fact, only that way we can win this challenge. It's the Millennium Challenge. I have no doubt that for Portugal there's a lot that we have been taking into our plate as a transversal challenge in which all areas of policies. So thank you very much. It's very nice for me to be here in Brazil. Thank you very much.
Neste momento, convido
Now
a
I
falar por
invite
5 minutos
for
a
5 minutes
representante da
speech
União
a representative from the
Interparlamentar.
Interparliamentary Union.
Muchas gracias. Es un gusto estar aquí el día de hoy
Thank
como
you.
presidenta de las mujeres parlamentarias de la Unión Interparlamentaria. Envío un fuerte abrazo de parte de nuestra presidenta Tulia Axon. Quiero felicitar a la diputada
I'd like
Benedicta
to
por hacer
congratulate
esto posible.
the legislature Benedita for making this possible. A few years ago, I had the opportunity to be with her in Brasilia, with legislator Soraya Santos, and I am proud to see that this first meeting of parliamentary women could take place here. So congratulations. I know that behind this meeting of women, many efforts were made to make it possible. So congratulations. I'd like also to greet Claudia Carneiro, representative of Brazil in the Committee of Women in the Parliamentary Committee. So I congratulate you for your work, though. I'd like to recall the electoral process that took place has been taking place since 2024. And I'm proud to say that in Mexico, we had one of the electoral processes which were one of the most important ones in our history. Elections for 25,000 positions, and I'm honored to say that we have, for the first time, the first woman president in Mexico. We are proud of it, having the first woman president in Mexico, something we have dreamed of for a long, long time. And we are the second country now in Latin America, together with Xiomara Castro, that has now a woman president. This stands to the fact that only 11% of prime ministers or presidents are women in the world. We are half of the population. Nevertheless, we are represented in 26.7% of parliaments generally. I'd like to say that there has been a major increase in women participation in the parliament, especially in Africa. But we also see other parliaments like Oman and Yemen, where there is not one single woman in lower chambers of the parliament. Well, so we have access of women to parliament in the following ways. We have presidents of the parliament, like in the case of Mexico. Well, here actually we have the president of the Congress, a woman. We have the Bahamas, Belize, case, Germany, where we have presidents of the Congress, women presidents for women. But 28% only of women are presidents of parliaments in several countries, in all countries. But we need to make sure to be represented and also be included in decision-making procedures. And in America, we have the largest representation of women, 35%. This is the continent with the most representation by women, followed by Europe with 18%. And it's all been through quotas. The quotas have enabled women to be more represented in the parliament. In Mexico, we have a representation of quotas of 50-50, a 50-50 approach. We have the second legislature in history, which is paired 50-50. The president of Mexico has been elected as a woman, and the president of the Congress, the Senate, and the legislature is a woman. The president of the Supreme Court is a woman. But we need to do more and open doors, and I'd like to take advantage of this opportunity to talk about this 135-year-old organization represented by 30,000 parliamentary people in the world are talking about women, no matter where the country you come from, the continent you come from. Well, it's high time for women to mobilize, to go above those 13%, to be part of the financial and defense committees, more and more, to be placed as prime ministers. Lately, many women are approaching politics, but they are affected by fatigue, violence. But we need to make a change in that, to put women in the leadership position. And we are important to struggle and fight against climate change. Unfortunately, we are living this issue, but nevertheless, yes, then again, we need to mobilize women all over the world to make a change.
Now I want to invite for 5 minutes the representative of UN Women. Good afternoon. I would like to greet the representative Yanamoto chaired this event, and through her greet all authorities present here. I want to thank for the invitation, for the partnership of UN Women. According to data from the World Meteorological Organization, the impact of extreme climates and climate changes like droughts and extreme rains, heat waves inland and on the sea, and the melting of ice are affecting the whole world, and the consequences are increasing. We have seen that in Brazil, especially in Rio Grande do Sul state, and now at the Pantanal area. And we see the same happening in other parts of the world, like in Afghanistan, Indonesia, and Kenya, just to mention countries where there were extreme events this year. We need to look beyond emergency actions and focus on long-term policies for the adaptation, mitigation, resilience, and reduction of the risk of disasters with a gender perspective and that are intersectional. Even though climate change and disasters affect significantly the human security, health, and environment, we have debated here many different ways, like these, where these effects occur in an unequal way. That's why we at UN Women emphasize that climate action should approach the environmental crisis encompassing climate change, biodiversity crisis, pollution and degradation of the earth, and also the inequalities of gender that are affecting the lives of half or more than half of the population on a daily basis. Both sets of crises are the main challenges to achieve sustainable development. And at the core of this perception, assessment, and this reading, the recognition, the acknowledgement of factors like race, ethnicity, geography, and capacity are also factors where these inequalities are organized. And in case the worst case scenarios in terms of climate are confirmed until 2030, we see over 236 million women and children will suffer from hunger or food insecurity. 100 million men and women, men and male kids will suffer, boys. So this has an impact in girls that live in rural, poor areas because they depend strongly on natural resources to get food, water, and fuel. The change and the climate disasters increase the unpaid load of work of women and girls in their homes and communities. Even though women are the keepers of sustainable practices in their territories, as mentioned here, and even though women and their organizations face different barriers when defending the environment and human rights, just like the exclusion of negotiation spaces at a national and multilateral levels, the reduced and restricted funding, the threats to their physical security, especially in terms of their work as advocates. The National Mechanism of Gender equality are not equally involved in climate governance. With the concept of climate justice, with the gender perspective, UN Women defends, advocates an alternative vision where all people can fully enjoy their human rights with no discrimination in a healthy and sustainable planet. It means prioritizing the welfare of all people and the planet, acknowledging interdependence between human beings and nature, and abandoning economies based in extraction and pollution in favor of economies based in care and regeneration. The structure of climate change with a gender perspective can put the world closer to this view. That's why we propose 4 dimensions to work with. The first, recognition, create a world where rights, labor, and knowledge of women are duly valued. Second dimension is the redistribution, where resources and economic opportunities are shared.
A terceira, representação, o que significa que as decisões coletivas seriam tomadas com a inclusão de todas as vozes consideradas em sua diversidade. E a quarta é a dimensão de reparações, que nos levaria a um mundo que reconhece as injustiças históricas e que tem uma atuação responsável perante as gerações passadas e futuras. Precisamos avançar em direção a um novo modelo de desenvolvimento que coloque as pessoas, a sustentabilidade da vida e do planeta no centro.
At the center. That's why the women all over the world, women parliamentary, have an important role to build this new world and materialize climate justice. By saying that women must be in the leading roles to the responses of climate changes, we also acknowledge the work of women in parliaments that have a connection with the women in their territories, with rights and equalities agenda, and also helping protect and defend of environmental advocates and human rights advocates. This work must go on, supporting an agenda of equality and justice in the world. Please count on UN Women to advance on that. Thank you.
Neste momento,
right now, I'd like to invite for 5 minutes the representative of Cape Verde. Thank you. Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Lisa Algado from the National House of Cabo Verde. I would like to start by saying that inequalities are all women, and in my intervention I'll be speaking specifically about justice, more specifically on the promotion of climate justice and sustainable development for women and children. Because you always ask, what climate justice has to do with sustainable development for women and girls? And I answer a lot. It has a lot to do. This relationship is clear. The effects of the climate imbalance affect people in different proportions, especially in underdeveloped countries or developed countries. In our countries, women and children that end up paying a greater piece of this bill. Cape Verde, my country, is a small country. It's a group of islands in Western Africa that will be turning half a century as an independent country. And what happened after the colonial Portuguese regime that lasted over 500 years? The population tends to be closer to the coast of the islands, where most of the cities are, and other urban groups, and where we see a greater concentration of the economic activities of the country. Cape Verde is a country that was suffered cycles and with longer droughts and rainfalls that we have never seen before, and we are threatened by the elevation of sea level and other extreme events. We cannot ignore that Cape Verde is nowadays a very vulnerable country to risks from climate change. Drought has been one of the responsible for the abandonment of rural areas and the consequent concentration of this population, displaced population in the outskirts of the cities in undignified conditions. So in these spontaneous neighborhoods and the rural areas, most of the people affected by extreme poverty, and women and children are the main victims of this situation.
Por muito que custe de afirmar, eu tenho que reconhecer que Cabo Verde ainda bastante marcado
Cape Verde is still marked by machism and that preserves women and girls' domestic activities, taking away from them a fair participation in the development of the country, equal as men and boys. Fortunately, there is an awareness now, and it comes with a willingness to change or opening new horizons for girls and women in our country. The governments of Cape Verde have defined the eradication of extreme poverty as one of the priorities based on the motto, not leaving anyone behind, and looking at the Millennium Goals. The current administration started a process that reduced poverty drastically and also reduces the gender disparities. Just to give you an idea, 40% of those elected in the past municipal elections were women. Women were elected in the last legislative elections. 34.7% of women. Gender-based violence was reduced in the past decade, and we have seen important advancements in this matter. Also in the coverage of social inclusion, economic inclusion of the youth, access to health, and also services to the elderly and handicapped people. Cape Verde is one of the top 10 countries in terms of access and quality of social services. Other progresses that we have seen in the fight of women for equality, including the zero list men and women in the choice of candidates for political positions. Because of the struggles for education of girls in all levels, it is key, and that's where the trigger is to advance towards a true equality of gender. It's also very exciting to see the increase and leadership of women in large countries and organizations of civil society and also in social media. That's the path we want to follow, and that's the path we are following. Even though we recognize that women have achieved a lot in the political and social economical world, there's a lot to do. Women have to move faster fighting for gender equity and equality, because that's when they will be in better conditions to promote climate justice and promote sustainable development, taking into account women and girls. Thank you all so much. We are together in this fight for the planet and for us. Thank you.
Agradeço a participação de todas nesta primeira mesa temática e declaro encerrada a presente sessão. Peço que todos se dirijam à apresentação cultural Coco de Roda Chique Chique e em seguida para um coffee break, e que às 16h30, às 4h30 da tarde estejam aqui, pois o painel Brasil se iniciará pontualmente às 16h45. Muito obrigada.
Thank you very much.